¿Qué lo que, mi gente? ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está? We are back here for your ¿Qué lo que podcast. I'm your co-host, Albert Garcia. And as always, I'm here with our always fabulous, always on point, Venecia Fernandez, lovely. Venus, ¿cómo está? ¿Qué lo que?
¿Qué lo que? Oh my goodness. Mira, luchando como todo el mundo. You know, it is a daily struggle nowadays, but I got some exciting news. Today's guest, remember I told you that I was participating with Mangu for Biden?
Claro, claro.
And I got to meet firsthand un dominicano, pero con título, with title.
I mean, more than our previous guest?
Yes, more. Like, not for anything, and we have to we have to surround it and let our people know. For those that are really involved in American politics, because let's face it, Dominicans love baseball and politics.
Eso sí, verdad.
But we need to talk about American politics. The highest level of politics, or in general, because I'm a Democrat, is the chairman of the Democrats, like the main guy. And for those of you that might not know, like he's Dominican American.
No me diga. So, we got the Tom Perez in the house. We got the Tom Perez.
I mean, the Tom Perez. So for those of you that don't know, I'm going to give you a little, like always, going to tell you a little bit about Tomas Perez. He's an attorney, and he is the chair of the Democratic National Committee. He was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. He's first generation Dominican immigrants, because his parents were born in Santo Domingo in Dominican Republic. Mr. Perez is a graduate from Brown University, Harvard,
Brown Bears.
And wait. And John F. Kennedy School of Government. Okay,
yeah,
like he got some. He got
some stuff.
And under the Obama administration, he previously served as the Assistant Attorney General of Civil Rights, as well as the U.S. Secretary of Labor. And let's face it, he is the first Dominican American to chair the Democratic National Committee. That's who we have today. So, ¿qué lo que?
Wow, ¿qué lo que? Mr. Perez, ¿qué lo que?
Oh, mucho gusto. Es un gran honor pasar tiempo con ustedes.
It's a great honor. It's a great honor to have you here on the show. We know we are the days to the election is counting down. It's arguably the most important, not just the most important election of our lifetime, but really kind of a generation-defining, country-defining kind of election. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your journey. We want to hear. Tell us a little bit about your journey, right? Your parents, where in the yard they were born, and how do you, in terms of your childhood, how has your childhood and how and your background, how is that, and particularly perhaps your family's political history, how has that impacted you? How did that set you on your own personal journey in life?
Oh, that's a great question. Mis padres nacieron en la República Dominicana. Mi papá nació en La Vega y mamá en la capital. Y el cementerio donde están es el cementerio en La Vega, el mismo cementerio que está Juan Bosch.
Oh, Juan Bosch.
Muy bien.
Nice.
Sí, el mismo cementerio. Y mi abuelo, el papá de mi mamá, él fue el diplomat in 1920, thereabouts.
Wow.
Before Trujillo came into power, he was a career diplomat. And after Trujillo came into power, he made my grandfather, this was about 1930, 1931, he made him the ambassador to the United States. So my mother, ella nació en Santo Domingo, pero la familia movió a Washington, D.C. cuando él tuvo la oportunidad de ser el embajador. It took only a couple years for my grandfather to realize that Trujillo was a thug. And for those who may not know the history of Trujillo, Trujillo was trained by the U.S. Marines. And the United States occupied the Dominican
Yes.
Republic from about 1960 to 1925, thereabouts. And during that period, again, Trujillo was trained by the Marines. And when Trujillo came to power, there was a real question in the United States: do we recognize him or not? And a number of people recommended, well, we should recognize him and try to work with him. With hindsight, not the right decision. But again, my grandfather had a real moral dilemma because it became very clear to him, again, maybe 3 years into his tenure, thereabouts, that Trujillo was a thug. His challenge was he still had family back in DR. And so think about it, speak out, you put your family in harm's way. If you don't speak out, you can't live your values. And he ultimately concluded that he had no choice but to speak out. And that's how we came to this country. He was, se declaró non grata. La familia de mi mamá ellos movieron a Washington Heights, which is, we're all good Dominicans.
No doubt. That's where I grew up.
If you go to the foot of the George Washington Bridge in Upper Manhattan, you will see George Washington High School. That's where my mom graduated from high school. And they lived in New York. My dad was pretty active as well, and he had to leave because of Trujillo. And that's how we came to the States. And my parents taught me that you should love this country. My mother was one of 9. And 4 out of 5 brothers served as legal immigrants in the U.S. Army, and they served with great pride because this adopted home, gave us opportunity. It was times were tough, but they were so appreciative of being free and the ability to live and try to earn a living here, and they wanted to give back to the country. So literally, 4 of her 5 male siblings. Enlisted in the U.S. Army and served with pride and distinction. And I'm frankly, I'm very grateful that Donald Trump wasn't the president at that time, because people like us would not have been allowed in because of his immigration policies. We were refugees. That's what happened after my grandfather was declared non grata. When my grandmother died in the 50s, I never met her. She died before I was born. This is my father's mother. My dad couldn't go back because I'm the youngest of 5, and 3 of my siblings were already born. And they told him, if you go back for your mother's funeral, you will get in to the country, but there's a good chance you won't get out because of who you are. And it angered my father for the rest of his life that he couldn't go to his mother's funeral. Ella vivió en La Vega. Ellos están en el mismo cementerio en La Vega.
Wow.
And that was, my parents taught me that you always give back. Unfortunately, I was 12 years old when my dad passed away. And we settled in Buffalo, New York, because the weather was very similar between DR and Buffalo. I was waiting for you.
Comediante aquí, who knew?
My dad was in the Army. When he got out of the Army, his last duty station was Atlanta, Georgia. And then he got an offer to work at the VA hospital in Buffalo, New York. He loved working with veterans. And that was his passion. And so they moved there in the late 50s, and my dad died in 74. Wow. And so he lived there for the rest of his life. And Buffalo was great to my family, and especially after my dad passed away, things were, we weren't poor, but thank God for Pell Grants in college, and we struggled and worked on the back of a trash truck. I did anything I could to work my way through college. Again, we were not destitute by any stretch. And we had a community of people who always made me feel like I was the richest guy on the earth. Money isn't the measure of your success in life. I had a wonderful community of people That's why I'm a proud Dominican American. I love the majority of my family lives in DR, almost all of my father's side, and the majority of my mother's side lives in Santo Domingo or La Vega or Santiago. Those are probably the three primary cities, and it's always part of who we are, and we love our proud Dominican American roots. We love what we've done in this country, and we love calling. I have my, I have my baseball and I have my politics. Okay, because those are here's my baseball owned by Pedro Martinez, who I got to meet a few times because I'm a White Sox fan. And I'll show you one more thing, which is here's my big Poppy jersey, and if you look really closely there, the four that's signed by Poppy. Okay, because we got
credit. You got credit.
So I'm a big fan of both of them, and my son. I have three children, and he's a big baseball player, and so we've assimilated the culture. My son went down to DR a couple times to play baseball with the travel team, and it was a really impactful cultural experience because the baseball wasn't nearly as important as the interaction and frankly, seeing abject poverty. I don't want my children to simply go down there and go to an all-inclusive and put a bracelet on and think that that's normal life. I want them to understand all of the wonderful things about the Dominican Republic and all of the challenges that we're confronting in the Dominican Republic. And in that respect, we're no different than what we are here in the United States. And so I feel very blessed. My parents taught me that to whom much is given, much is expected, and I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to serve Barack Obama and Bill Clinton before that, and now in this current job. They taught me, if you want to get to heaven, you got to have letters of reference from people.
And I must say, your letters are very top notch.
Well, here's the problem, though, Venus. They didn't tell me how many I needed to get in.
So you're still collecting them. It's okay. Get them all. Get them all. Get as many as you can, just in case. Just in case. Tú nunca sabes, as they say. Tú nunca sabes. Oh my goodness.
It's always what I love about our situation is whenever we get to go back, our children really embrace their roots. They're proud of their roots. When they were in middle school, they always did papers on the Dominican Republic. A couple of my kids did papers on my grandfather because I wanted them to learn more about him. Someone I only met once because after Trujillo died, then my grandfather moved back, but he passed away maybe 2-3 years later. So I was basically in diapers when he died.
Oh.
And so I didn't get to meet him, but I often wonder. I'd love to have a conversation with him because I got to, not once but twice during the Obama administration, I got to lead the delegation to La República Dominicana for the inauguration of the president. It was Danilo Medina. It was his first term and his second term, and I got to lead the delegation. And there was a dinner the night before in the palace where my grandfather had many meetings, back in the 20s and 30s. And I just found myself looking around the room like this, trying to imagine what it must have been like. And so it was what I would describe as way cool.
I'm getting a little starstruck or just emotional just hearing you talk about those experiences and just having similar experiences myself because, my children, as well as going back and just also understanding the impact of our culture to who I am today. So I really and I just can't imagine let's be clear, your grandfather's in the history books, in our books. We gotta, many Dominicans that are there, they have to study who your grandfather is. So that just must be an amazing experience for your family, your sons, as well as our culture, because we have to continue to understand the diversity of it as well as how we impacted each other. Because sometimes when we learn, we don't realize, like when you talked about earlier, Trujillo was trained by U.S. Marines. You know, those are information that sometimes we don't know, but how we've always, as a community, as a society, has always been intermingled and helped each other, or just gotten information. So it's great to hear. I'm a little wow. I couldn't imagine how you felt.
I mean, there's a very interesting baseball history and we know some of the story, but I just read a book about Satchel Paige was,
Yeah.
one of the remarkable baseball players, in Negro leagues, and and I love, again, baseball is a passion of mine. I played it, didn't play it very well. I had a deceptive curveball. I had a deceptive fastball. My fastball was deceptive more than you think. And so I didn't last that long. And but I became a student of the game, and I really enjoy it, and I enjoyed coaching my son. And there was a book about Satchel Paige, and he made a lot of money playing in the Dominican Republic because the discrimination in the states against African American baseball players. He wasn't making that much money, and Trujillo offered him a lot of money to play on his team in the Dominican League, and it's a really interesting book that I would call to people's attention. And you see a lot of Trujillo's, the pressure they were putting on the teams. You have to win. My team has to be the champion.
Wow.
And it was a very interesting read. I encourage anyone who loves the intersection of baseball, the Dominican Republic, the era of the Negro Leagues, to read that.
No,
well, you heard it here first.
And it brings up a lot of the historical connections that I think that people forget that has long existed between the United States and the Dominican Republic, right? Going all the way back to Frederick Douglass being one of the very first, ambassadors to the Dominican Republic, to even in terms of the relationships that folks have. It's also, again, it's like, we carry with us the legacy of our relatives as we create our own new legacy, right? There's something, I think there's something beautiful, right? I think about your children learning about your grandfather in DR history books, and I gotta believe that somewhere down he's looking upon it and he's saying, "Wow, Conchule, my great grandson, my grandson has risen to the ranks, of one of the highest positions, arguably one of the highest positions in politics, right? In any country's politics, being the chairman, of a national party." But my question to you around that is, it's not easy being a chairman, right? I mean, especially the chairman of the Democratic Party, right? I mean, there's a lot of great things about progressives and Democrats, but there's a lot of work, right, in terms of bringing people together and doing things. And I'm just curious, how has that been in terms of organizing and trying to in terms of the teamwork involved. What have you learned about that work, right? Especially as it relates to maybe being a lesson around how we bridge our own differences in the nation as a whole.
Well, when I ran for the job, we were at a low moment. We had lost the 2016 election, and to put a slightly finer point on it, in the run-up to the 2016 election, we lost a lot of other elections. So we had, I think it was 15 governors when I took over out of 50. We had lost almost 1,000 seats in state legislatures, state senates, state houses. In Florida is a great example. We have a chance to flip one of the chambers in Florida this year, and that's real progress. But boy, there were some years like 2014 where Republicans had a supermajority, and Florida is a 50-50 state. We shouldn't have Republican supermajorities in those legislatures. So long story short is we had a lot of rebuilding to do. We had to rebuild our infrastructure and rebuild trust. And for those who don't really know what the DNC does, I totally get that. And what we do is we help Democrats up and down the ticket to win races, whether you're Annette Tadeo in Florida running for state senate, or whether you are Andrew Gillum running for governor, or Bill Nelson running for senate, or someone running for school board. I met somebody, a Dominicano in Pennsylvania, who was on school board. They have a large population, mucho Latino, mucho Dominicanos y Boricuas in Pennsylvania. And it was, and so our mission is to help everybody win. And the way we do that is by building infrastructure. We have what's called a voter file. It's information about voters in each state. And when that information is really granular, think about if you were in a company and you sell a product, you want to know as much as possible about your consumers. So you gather information about your consumers. You want to know, what kind of car does Venus drive? Tell me other things about her and what she does, and that enables you to build a relationship with that person and sell them that product. Well, in politics, it's a similar thing. We want to know more about you. We want to know what your values are. We want to know what your hopes and dreams and frustrations are. And so we build this file on voters, and we buy up a lot of stuff. We bought up 150 million cell phone numbers so that we could communicate with you. We buy up consumer information so that we can learn more about you. And then we work to build relationships. And so the job of the DNC when I got there was to rebuild that infrastructure, the data and technology infrastructure, to build an organizing infrastructure so that we can have conversations. Ideally, in many cases, Dominicanos hablando, aprendiendo. ¿Qué necesitamos hacer para mejorar su vida? That's really the fundamental question. How can we help improve life? Here in the States right now, we have the biggest issue for voters across the country is healthcare. Obamacare, the state that has the most people enrolled in Obamacare of the 50 states is Florida.
Wow.
And in particular, Latinos have benefited immensely from Obamacare. Here's why. Latinos were disproportionately among the ranks of the uninsured. And so Obamacare enabled 20 million people who didn't have health insurance to get health insurance. Obamacare is what enables you, if you have a condición preexistente, to keep your health insurance. Before Obamacare, they could kick you off. Or if you were trying to get it, they could tell you you're not eligible. Obamacare, if you have a 23-year-old son or daughter, is what allows you to keep them on your health plan until they're 26. If any of you have ever known someone who's had a child who was born prematurely, I know someone whose child was 1 pound when born. 1 pound. Think about, this baseball, it might have been that weight. Probably a little more than this. It probably weighs a little less than 1 pound, but you get my point. 1 year later, she came home healthy, smiling, making real progress. And the healthcare costs were about $1.6 million. Before Obamacare, that family would have been on the hook. Insurance companies can cap your benefits. Now under Obamacare, they can't do that. So you don't have to file bankruptcy in order to save your child's life. I bring this all up because what we talk about are the issues that matter most. And one of the reasons we were so successful in winning elections over the last 3 years across the country, one of the main reasons I think we have the U.S. House of Representatives in the majority now is because of healthcare. When the Republicans were in charge of the Senate and the House, when I was Labor Secretary, I think they had, it was 60 or 70 separate votes to repeal Obamacare. 60 or 70. And then in 2017, they controlled everything. They controlled the White House, they controlled the House, they controlled the Senate. And they tried to get rid of Obamacare, and they failed. And I'll tell you, one of the people responsible for their failure, in addition to Democrats, was a guy named John McCain. It was a very courageous vote that he took because he understood Obamacare a lot. And as someone who had had a lot of health issues in his own life because he was a prisoner of war who had been tortured, he understood the importance of this. John McCain is very popular in South Florida because he's a war hero. And this president, said John McCain's not a hero because he got captured. I don't want my soldiers to get captured. I mean, just a fundamental disrespect for people who served our nation. And by the way, Latinos are disproportionately veterans. We love this country. Not just Dominicanos like my dad. My dad served with pride in the U.S. Army. Legal immigrants, by the way, have been serving in the armed forces since the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
That's the contributions that immigrants have made. And so the work we've been doing is to build that infrastructure, but also not just build infrastructure, build trust. And the way you build trust is you build relationships. You listen to people. What's on your mind? What can we do to improve your life? And the answer to that question right now is we got to fix the coronavirus. We got to fix the economy. The economy's been in collapse. We've got people dying, and it's disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. And we frankly have a president who doesn't have a plan. Masks. The head of the Centers for Disease Control said if people would put a mask on, we could save about 100,000 lives over the next over a 100-day period, 100,000 lives. That's kind of like asking someone to put a seatbelt on. Yeah, it might be a little uncomfortable to put a seatbelt on. And putting a seatbelt on doesn't save every life. But what we know about a seatbelt is that the use of seatbelts and the compulsory seatbelt laws across the country have saved hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives. A small imposition can go a long way. And those families who have a loved one because they had the seatbelt on and they survived, they can tell you firsthand. And so that's a slightly long way of saying what we do as a party is we're building those relationships. And your elected officials, their job is to serve you and improve your life, not to feather their own nest. And what I love about being a Democrat is the Democratic Party is about fighting for the little guy. And I use guy in a gender-neutral term.
Don't worry, no te preocupes, don't worry. We all understand.
We get it. No, it's true.
It's about, making sure it's about making sure that people in the shadows can get that opportunity.
No, that's and that's I think that's always the challenge. That's a challenge for Democrats. I think that's the challenge of America, right? Is working through and really, it's one thing to say you appreciate diversity. It's another thing to actually honor it with values, right? And honor people's lives and stuff. And so I think we're seeing the parties, both parties, but we're certainly seeing the Democrats being held to that standard and coming through it in a lot of places, right? And saying that we want the opportunity to honor not only the people's current lives, but also honor their family legacies, honor the hard work that they've put into building this country and wanting the opportunity to continue to do so. And I think I think we're seeing a lot of that, coming into real focus in terms of this election. One of the things I think that's really interesting too is that you've seen in the last certainly the last couple of weeks here in Florida, and I think you've seen it here when you've been your time here, has been Dominicanos really, really mobilizing, right? Really kind of mobilizing for your candidate, for the Biden-Harris ticket, but just in general, just mobilizing politically. And so I'm just curious, coming from the north, coming in and seeing that, what's been your reaction to kind of seeing not the Dominicanos, the Mangu for Biden and the parades and the different ways that people are trying to organize, especially through a pandemic?
Hay mucho entusiasmo con Dominicanos por Biden y Harris. Y hay más o menos 120 20,000 dominicanos en Florida que son elegibles a votar. Hillary Clinton perdió por más o menos 100,000 votos. El voto dominicano puede ser la diferencia en Florida. Pero hay dominicanos que son elegibles a votar, pero en la elección pasada no votaron. No puede ocurrir. Hay muchos soñadores en los Estados Unidos y algunos son dominicanos. Y los soñadores no pueden votar este noviembre, pero los soñadores están en la boleta. El Corte Suprema dijo claramente el junio pasado que la administración de Trump o cualquier presidente tiene el derecho de eliminar la programa de los soñadores, pero tiene que esa apropiada, y Donald Trump no usó la procesa apropiada. Entonces, la victoria era muy importante, pero temporal. Entonces, si conoce a una soñadora o soñador, es muy importante comprender que ellos están en la boleta. Si conoce a una persona que tiene una condición preexistente, es muy importante comprender que el cuidado de salud está en la boleta. Trump quiere eliminar Obamacare. Punto. El seguro de salud está en la boleta el 3 de noviembre y está en el Corte Suprema el 10 de noviembre, una semana después. Y es sumamente importante que nosotros entendemos eso. Joe Biden tiene un plan muy concreto y completo para asegurar que podemos mantener y mejorar nuestra cobertura. Él va a proteger Obamacare y mejorar Obamacare. Él va a asegurar que personas con condiciones preexistentes pueden mantener su cobertura. Él puede proteger el primer día a los soñadores. Al Congreso una propuesta envolviendo reforma migratoria, reforma comprensiva, reforma que va a dar oportunidades para los 11 millones de personas que no tienen papeles aquí. Joe Biden tiene respeto para nuestra comunidad.
I know our time is winding down here on the show, but we couldn't let you leave. We couldn't let you leave with what is the most somehow the most important part of our show, which is always our queen of the show here, Vanessa, always leads us through our Tres Golpes section. Venus, why don't you take it away?
Before I start, Chairman Perez, I just want to ask you, ¿tú estás listo? ¿Tú estás listo? Porque estas son las preguntas que la gente quiere saber. Ok. Las tres, mira, ya está, porque soy famosa, ya yo te dije, soy famosa. So, 1, 2, 3, golpe, bachate o merengue.
O merengue.
Totones o Maduro.
Oh, Maduro para mí.
Okay. He got a little sweet tooth.
Me encanta. Me encanta.
No, he can't change it. He can't change it. And the last one.
No, yo comí Maduro y tostones cuando...
Sí. Siempre político. He's got to balance it out. The tostones vote, the Maduro vote, you got to play both ways.
He don't want to lose nobody. Okay. And the biggest question, the hardest question, ¿Presidente o Brugal?
Presidente. Me gusta, prefiero cerveza.
Man of the people, man of the people.
Yeah, man of the people.
Mi hermano prefiere Brugal, pero yo prefiero presidente.
Well, I must say with your little...
Y por eso yo puedo comprar presidente aquí en Maryland.
Sí,
donde vivo. Sí, un kilómetro de mi casa, yo puedo comprar presidente.
Oh, okay, ya lo dijo. So we're all invited to have presidente. No, just kidding. Block away. No, but well, we shouldn't be surprised that you chose presidente because, you know, with your baseball in your blood, you know, Alex Rodriguez is now the president of Presidente. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. But I love it.
Pedro Guerrero used to. All right. It was an honor to be with you. Un placer, un gran honor. Y por favor, vota.
Yes.
Nuestros números son nuestro poder y nuestro voto es nuestra voz.
I love it.
Before we let you go, I just want to say also, Chairman, if there's one, aside from voting, if there's one thing that you want to leave people with, you know, in terms of entering in, what's the one thing that you want to you want people to know about you, about the party, about this moment in time?
Well, we are the party of we. If people ask me what's the difference between us and the other side right now, I really think Democrats are the party of we. We all succeed only when we all succeed. We all succeed when everyone has an opportunity. They're the party of me. Donald Trump's fighting for people like himself at the expense of everyone else. That's not right. And that's why I'm proud to be a Democrat. And that's why I hope people will vote for Joe Biden.
There you go, folks. So you've heard it there. And as we said, thanks a lot, Chairman, for spending time with us. I know it's a sprint towards the end, and we appreciate you being here. And to our fans and listeners, like you say, you know, like the Chairman says, in terms of you don't know how to vote, make a plan. We'll put the links in terms of our website and our social media pages. And again, a pleasure to have you here. We hope to have you
Un placer.
on in the new year. And as we always say in